Well, hello, Tina. It's great for us to reconvene for another of our sessions around biblical keys for financial breakthrough. Um,
Indeed.
for those who are joining us and who will be watching this afterwards as well, we've had a little bit of a kind of break as I had a few months of sabbatical time, and summer has happened and things like that. But we're now back and hitting the ground running um, uh, uh, today with a focus on choosing godly ways over selfish ones. So, I
Yes.
mean, Tina, do you want to kind of do? I mean, firstly, kind of feel free to say anything you want to, really, but a bit of an opening, you know, kind of reflection on where you're coming from with this.
Well, I think it's been good to have a little bit of a break. You might be interested in knowing, Mark, that I lost all my notes for this in the break, and so I kind of had to go back over the old videos and remind myself of what we've done and what we still need to do. And so in doing that, I was able to kind of come in and think, yeah, so this is what's needed now. So we've done some things big picture, some things more detail, and this is a bit of both. It's coming at breakthrough, kingdom breakthrough, because of some of the more faithful things that we need to learn to do as believers, that actually have eternal consequences. And I want us to be able to see that, because oftentimes in the moment, a self-centered decision just seems like, oh well, it's just for now. That's one of the lies of the enemy, by the way, that he says, oh, it's just a small sin, it doesn't affect other people, it's just, it's just between you and God and whatever. And actually, no, these things can have far reaching consequences. And I want us to be able to see that. So, yeah, that's where my focus is today, looking at some people in scripture and the difference they made because of their godly ways.
And that's really helpful and a good, kind of reflecting back on the sessions we've done so far. We have, it has been a real sense of kind of trying to have in a sense, an eternal view, a kind of a longer view, and also really bring it kind of down to earth, and kind of those two coming together. It's I've been finding it really great to reflect like this, and I look forward to more of these. So, fire away, Tina. Take us into this a bit deeper.
Okay, right. So I was thinking about, I mean, there's people like Joseph, um, you know, who was sold into slavery by his brothers, and he ended up pretty much becoming the prime minister of Egypt. And he received promotion upon promotion because he kept making the right decision. He kept making the godly decision. Sometimes it's a bit like when you're on a diet, you think, that's it, I've made a mess. One time I forgot I was on a diet and thought, oh gosh, I forgot I was on a diet. I've just eaten that. Do you know what? I'll throw it out the window. I'll forget the diet. And we can be like that a bit with sin. We think, that's it, I've made a mess. I'm going to throw in the towel. Or someone's accusation, even if we haven't sinned, someone can throw an accusation at us, and we might think, you know what, if they're going to think that of us anyway, then actually, what have I got to lose? But
Yeah,
actually,
double
Joseph
down
didn't
there.
go down there. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Joseph didn't make that kind of that those quick responses. He was a very thoughtful and careful person. And because when his brothers eventually came to Egypt because they were starving, one of the things he did was he wanted to test their motives. Were they still the kind of brothers that would sell their brother into slavery? Or had they learned from their self-centered ways? Had they moved? And so, he put a test in there for them, didn't he, to check that out? And sometimes we need wisdom. It's not just godly ways. If we have godly ways, what use are they without wisdom? Because we can just be naive, can't we? We need wisdom, I think, to manage godliness. And when he realized that that actually they had changed. And he reassured them, didn't he? He encouraged them. You know what? God's used that for good anyway. You know, you meant it for harm. God meant it for good. And we read that in Genesis 45:7. So one of the things I liked about Joseph is, despite all the false accusation, and he had a lot of it, you know, his name was maligned, his character was maligned, everything about him was maligned. He learned to wait on God for justice. Wasn't that amazing? And I mean, what justice God poured out for him. You know, in Galatians 6:9, we're told not to get weary in doing good. And I'll be honest, I'm still working on that. Are you? I
Yeah.
get weary sometimes in doing good. I had an incident yesterday where, you know, I was misunderstood. And it just brought so much discouragement to me. I thought, why am I getting discouraged about this? Why is it getting to me so much? Because actually, I want people to see God in me, and so, you know, it's really, I think, important that we have our hearts right and that we're living for that audience of one. In other words, we're living for God. Another person we see in the Bible is Boaz. I love Boaz. You know, there's lots of jokes about Boaz. You know, about, you know, people looking out for their Boaz. But you know, one of the things I liked about him is that he was generous to Ruth, who was a Moabite. They weren't like God's chosen people. Before he realized rather, that she might actually become his wife. So he was kind and generous first. You know, he gave her attention. He let her, glean from the edges of his field. Gave her extra grain, and even let her eat with his workers, which he didn't need to do at all. He went the extra mile. I mean, what a godly response. And because of that, and because he then was able to redeem Elimelech's inheritance, um, you know, when Ruth kind of set her cap at him, as it were, um, then actually the consequence of Boaz and Ruth getting together was they had a little boy called Obed who happens to be in Jesus's genealogy. Isn't that a long-term godly consequence? So I liked Boaz for that. And then, of course, we see Abraham, who really exhibits good selflessness, and I think kind of inspiring selflessness. You know, as the older brother, when it came to choosing land, it was his right to decide, I'll have the best bit, you have the poor bit. And actually, he gave that choice to Lot. He let Lot choose where he didn't need to. That's selflessness, isn't it? That's a godly way. And he's very good at offering hospitality to strangers. We're actually in the process of doing that at the moment. We've got a couple of missionaries who are going to be staying up our tower for the next few nights, who I don't know from Adam, other than they've been doing some work in the kingdom. So, you know, offering hospitality to people that you don't know, not those you know, like, and trust, is seen as a godly character, a godly trait, rather. And then I loved how he interceded on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham said, you know, well, what happens if there's just 10 there? Would you spare Sodom and Gomorrah? And you know, his heart was wrenched at the thought of all those people, many seemingly innocent people dying. And so, yeah, we see all of those things in Abraham's life. Never mind the whole thing about him, you know, starting the whole stuff about tithing by tithing to Melchizedek as a thanksgiving to God. So yeah, those are some examples I see in the Bible of godly ways that attracted God's goodness, and I think they ended up attracting the generosity of God because they were really emanating His character.
Yeah. Now, what would you say to somebody who is listening in to this and said, "Yeah, totally agree with that, but I'm not Abraham, I'm not, you know, Joseph." How does that play out in my life?
Well, these people are in the Bible to be our inspiration, aren't they? And the best of whom is Jesus.
Mm.
But we're to see how they grew in character so that we can grow in character. We're to be encouraged by their example that they were a work in progress, so are we, and we can progress in things. But also, Jesus talks about, God knows even the hairs on your head. Um, well, it'd be an interesting one for you, Mark. He knows every hair that should be on your head. So, and in other words, God knows the intimate details of our lives, each of us individually. And so, whether or not it's somebody seemingly, biblically famous or not, we still have a responsibility because God's watching, and we're not doing it for ourselves and we're not doing it for an audience other than for Him. And, and really, finance, money, wealth, is something that we should be using for good. And if we are not going to use it for good, then honestly, I believe God won't give it us. I want to be a good steward. I don't know about you,
Mm,
but it talks in the Bible about how wealth should be used for justice, and we see in Acts 2, don't we, how the believers shared everything. One who had nothing, the other had a field. He sold his field and he just put it in the pot.
mm,
I would like to see that happening today. What I see is in many places is people are like they see people have got nothing, they see that they've got a lot, and people pay lip service. They don't. There's not the real sacrifice because they're doing it for the person. They're not doing it for God. And I think they need to, open your eyes and see that actually we should be generous in lending and giving to those who don't have.
mm.
And we're to be using um, our wealth, be it money, be it property, be it gifts. It can be all kinds of things to bless those who don't have, the poor and the needy. The Bible talks about them. And so, we have to be an example, I think, particularly when it comes to our consumerism,
Mm.
that we don't buy into this culture. So what would I say to people who say, I'm not Abraham? No, but that doesn't mean God doesn't see and God can't use, and you could be as famous as Abraham in God's eyes by doing the right thing. I mean, Ananias and Sapphira are a terrible example, aren't they?
Yes.
You'd think
Yeah.
they were giving generously, but the problem is they lied. They gave generously, but then they lied. Was this the full amount? All they needed to say was no.
Yeah.
They did all they needed to do was be honest. No, it wasn't. But because they lied, they were not recognizing that God sees all. And I think that's the thing. God sees all. So, we're going to be answerable for how we use our resources.
Yeah. And I mean, it
Sorry to jump
strikes
ahead.
me. I mean, it certainly strikes me that we're talking about generosity. I'm reminded of that little phrase that Jesus used at the end of the parable of the rich fool. Being rich towards God,
Yeah.
and that's a good way of putting it. Is it? But there's a kind of um, a discernment type thing in this, isn't there? That we're looking at our own motives and that sort of thing, and that helps us to be rich towards God.
Yes, I think, are we looking? I think it's good to check our motives, but
Mm,
I think our focus needs to not be on ourselves. I think that's the thing. It's interesting how on a Sunday morning, when it comes to the amount of debt even many Christians have, they don't remember it until it comes to giving into the collection. And then they remember, oh no, I'm in debt. I can't give that much. Well, that's not being rich towards God, is it?
mm,
It
mm,
might be rich in terms of getting a sofa on pay it over 2 years kind of thing. I've known people, and I've done it myself in a way when I was a younger Christian. Buy things and not realize it's stealing money from tomorrow, and stealing the freedom and the resources that we've got from tomorrow because we're not satisfied with what we have. And it kind of goes, I think, with learning to be satisfied with what we've got. You know,
Yeah.
I bumped the car last week, or rather, someone bumped into me, T-boned me at a junction, and it wrote off my old Audi. And I was like, oh goodness me. The problem is with older cars, when they get written off, is they don't give you their value often, the insurers don't. And so we had the amount that they were going to give us, and we thought we can't buy a car with that. And I went to the Lord about it and said, Lord, hear my prayer, let my cry come unto thee, and words to that effect.
You went all Anglican then.
But the Lord then reminded me that my mum gave up a Motability car 3 years ago when they took her insurance away. And Motability said then, do you want your daughter to have a car and drive it for you? And because she was upset at not driving, she said no. And so, but then the Lord reminded me. And so I literally rang Motability and said, we do a lot of running around for mum because we need a second car because of that. Could we still qualify for Motability under a name? And they said yes. So I'm picking up a brand new car tomorrow.
Wow.
But that came from me crying to the Lord, saying, I've been done here on my insurance, and I know, it's the way of the world, but God knows and wants to bless us and prosper us. And I think if we just seek his face, he'll show us creative and workable ways for each of our situations. I mean, not everyone can qualify for a Motability car. I recognize that, but God will show us other things. And in fact, that particular car was a gift from one of our Eagles. So we didn't pay for it. So God, your car is broken, not mine. Your car is broken, and now he's provided a new way of being able to get from A to B. So praise God.
It's really good. Well, thanks, Tina. I'm aware that we always try and encourage people to interact, and we haven't necessarily highlighted that in this session, but we'd really welcome people's comments as you join in with this, watch it afterwards. We'd love to hear from you. So I think we'll end there, shall we? And
absolutely.
We'll see each other soon for another video. And thanks everyone for joining in. Bye, Tina.
Bye-bye. See you shortly.